So, Jeff, obviously the reason we're here is this post that you put out today. Why did you feel the need to make this thing? Why did you feel the need to put this out there?
Yeah, well, I mean, I did post something about a week ago, right afterwards when I heard the coach say that someone had been punched, and that's sort of what started it, which is if somebody was the term punched has a very specific meaning, and obviously there'd be further investigation, but that certainly implies an intentional violent act. Actually, multiple intentional violent acts, I think, were implied or stated, accused. And that's something that I take very seriously. An unprovoked act of aggressive violence is a serious thing. And if that happened, I wanted us to get evidence of it. And if we could prove it, take it to court. In the days since, when it seemed apparent that that didn't exist, and again, there are crimes that happen and we don't have any video evidence of it. This just wasn't one of those times. This was maybe one of the most videotaped moments at least locally in this year. It was at a televised venue with I don't know how many cameras, professional cameras there. So yes, this is a highly photographed event, videotaped event. And so aside from the professional cameras that were there, in 2026, there's almost nobody that isn't carrying a videographic device in their pocket. And it was a type of moment where probably a high percentage of the people with those videographic devices had them out recording because it was a, big occasion. And quite frankly, from what I've seen, kind of from all quarters, fans of both teams and everybody. And so I felt like if this crime occurred, there was a very high likelihood that we were going to be able to get good evidence of it. And that's what we, as prosecutors, we care about is making sure we hold accountable wrongdoing, but making sure we have good solid evidence of it before we take it to court. When nothing surfaced, um, and notably nothing surfaced of a punch or multiple punches, certainly, and nothing surfaced of a trampling that I've seen. Nothing surfaced of a brawl. And these are other, even when given time to think about what was said, those kinds of terms were made. I felt like I needed to say something, and here's why. It's still, you know, the coach of a major basketball team has a lot of power and influence by virtue of their job. And I don't know for sure, but I would imagine that the press conference immediately following the UNC-Duke game might be one of the most highest points of attention that the coach of either team gets. And so, and the first thing stated at that press conference was, I had staff members punched in the face. Since then, he and other people have said things, but that statement is what has gotten way outsized attention compared to anything he said, certainly compared to anything I've said. And why that matters, and I said this in my post, is that in my job, almost all acts of violence are provoked in some way. They may not be justified, but there's some kind of provocation, either the real or perceived belief that the person committing the violence had been wronged in some way. Very high percentage of acts of violence are caused by someone wanting to get someone. And that's what I see in my work for the last 20 years as a prosecutor. And so, and also what tends to happen is that it tends to escalate. Once one person or group believes that they've been wrong, the other group gets back and they get back worse. And so is my attempt to try to dispel uh, I'm comfortable saying, false statement that people were punched at this event. Because there's simply just no evidence to support that anybody was.
Yeah. Were you able to find any single victim or potential victims here?
No. Now, to be fair, I am in standard practice, the DA's office is not usually an investigatory agency. It can be, but typically the police are the ones that do the investigation. And to my understanding, they have. And had they had something, I know that they would have brought it to us. That's what they do all the time. And so, but I felt like I was in a position because it was this unusual event that was so publicly visible that I was in a position to sort of make this public call for evidence, even in addition to sort of the typical law enforcement attempts to find evidence. And so through neither avenue has anything come to us.
Yeah. And I did want to ask, I mean, were these campus police officers who wound up investigating this? Was this Chapel Hill PD?
Yeah, UNC police would be the primary jurisdiction. There's several overlapping jurisdictions. There were law enforcement from several agencies there, and there always are to help with security. It's a big event in our community. But yes, UNC police would be the primary, and then if they needed assistance, they would ask. But yeah, UNC police.
So I mean, Jeff, you're saying pretty unequivocally, you're saying pretty unequivocally here that this was false. This did not happen. From your perspective, do you think that the onus is now on Jon Scheyer to come out and either clarify or retract what he said previously?
I I wouldn't. I want to stay in my lane, and so I'm not going to tell him what he should do. He is the person involved in this that is the most well known, and would any statement he makes about this obviously would get more attention than anybody else's. So, and that is what's happened so far. Is everything he has said has been rightly because he's the coach of a major basketball team. So if he were to clarify, um, it would get attention too, but that's up to him.
Yeah. Jeff, obviously you've been doing this for a number of years. This is not the first Battle of the Blues that we've had. This is not the first Battle of the Blues where there have been accusations of, shall we say, some chippy behavior in association with the game. Do you remember another situation like this where there was, allegations coming from a head coach?
Not that I can recall in I mean, that's part of it is that I'm not speaking of this from the position of a sports pundit. I'm thinking very specifically, this occurred within my jurisdiction, and so I have a heightened awareness of that. To answer your question, I don't recall there being this kind of accusation, certainly since I've been the DA. Um, even going back to my time as assistant DA, I don't recall that. There may be in some other games and some other places outside, but um, no, I mean, there's been sometimes violence that has occurred within the game itself. And I don't condone that by any stretch, but obviously that is a little bit, more complicated because physical contact is part of the game. And, I think oftentimes for those situations, it's better governed by the administration of the game itself. But that's not what this was. I mean, this was allegedly someone not involved in the game being intentionally punched by somebody else not involved in the game. And so that's why this stands out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to be clear here. At least from what you have seen, there are no evidence of any victims. There is no evidence of anybody being punched. There is no evidence of any of this happening at all.
That's correct. That's right.
Yeah. And Jeff, obviously you're a UNC guy, as you pointed out. You're a UNC graduate. You represent the people there in Orange County, in Chapel Hill. I imagine there are going to be some Duke fans who think you may be a little biased in what you're saying. I mean, how do you respond to that?
Well, I mean, they're free to believe that. I guess what I'd say is that I've prosecuted more UNC faculty, staff, administration, students, and student athletes than maybe any other practicing lawyer in this state. So I think that when I say I can be loyal to my alma mater and have a favorite as far as the basketball game, that's completely separate from when I'm analyzing things as a DA. I've been in the position where I've had to prosecute sports players that I cheer for, but there's evidence that they've done something wrong, and it's my job to hold them to account. And anyone can look at my record. There's no evidence that I've shown favoritism in my job to somebody because of where they went to school.
Yeah. I mean, Jeff, have you had the opportunity to speak to Jon Scheyer about this, or have you tried reaching out to him directly?
I I haven't spoken to him. I don't know if I don't know him. And frankly, I've never even had any impetus to want to say anything about him. I don't have anything against him personally. Um, this just, I mean, frankly, stood out to me as a shockingly unusual thing for someone with a microphone that size to either intentionally, but probably just carelessly, recklessly say something that was patently untrue. And and not really correct it when offered the opportunity. I went back and looked at the statements to try to see, and I didn't see anything that really did that. And again, this isn't about gotcha, okay? This has nothing to do with me wanting him to admit wrongdoing. That's not about that. It's about the public knowing that this violence didn't occur, so there aren't reprisals of more violence. Because at the end of the day, my job is seen as taking folks who have committed crimes and holding them to account in court. But the bigger picture responsibility I have is to try to lessen violence, lessen crime. Oh, yeah, we are in crime prevention. And so that's the impetus behind me making the statements I'm making.
Yeah, and is that a particular concern? I mean, we do have another Battle of the Blues game coming up.
Yeah, I hope not. But I guess what I'd say is that anytime I see that there's someone who is stoking the tenor of violence and then to find out that it was completely unnecessary because the violence they're accusing didn't occur, I want to try to turn that down. So all I can say is I sure hope not. I don't have any reason to think specifically. I just know that having done this for 20 years, I've seen far too often that when one person says somebody else did something wrong, somebody's going to want to get back for that. I hope that doesn't happen here.